Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere dazzlingly bright. A place where the sun feels less like a light and more like a slow oven turned to broil. You're standing at the edge of the Nile, squinting against the glare bouncing off 1,000 white linen tunics. The air smells faintly of mud, papyrus, and something that could only be described as ancient laundry day. You probably wouldn't last a morning in this heat. One step out of the shade, and you'd be halfway to a slow roast. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is there. I love knowing where in the world you're tuning in. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The sun hangs heavy over the Nile Valley, and you, a curious traveler, or perhaps a time-lost dreamer, find yourself in ancient Egypt around 1450 BCE. The river glitters like molten glass, its surface dotted with reeds and the shadows of egrets. The sound of distant chatter drifts from the riverbank where people kneel, beating fabric against smooth stones. This is not a festival or a temple ceremony, it's laundry day. And in Egypt, that's serious business. The first thing you notice is how bright everything is. The sand, the sky, the pale limestone temples, all blinding. Even the clothes gleam like miniature suns. Egyptians loved white linen, partly because it was practical in the heat, and partly because it symbolized purity. But there's a downside. Linen shows every speck of dust, and Egypt has no shortage of that. You're wrapped in a loose, off-white tunic that's already sticking to your skin. Within minutes, your sandals are full of sand, and sweat traces tiny rivers down your neck. You start to understand why the ancient Egyptians were obsessed with washing. When the average day reached 40 degrees C, you didn't just want clean clothes, you needed them. Down by the river, washerfolk work in rhythmic unison, their motions echoing across millennia. They dip the fabric, twist, wring, and slap it hard against stones. The sound is strangely hypnotic. Thwack, splash, squeeze, repeat. Each impact sends droplets of Nile water glittering through the air like little bursts of starlight. You watch as a boy hauls in another bundle of tunics from a reed basket. They smell faintly of natron, the salty mineral that Egyptians mined from dry lake beds. Natron, as historians love to point out, was Egypt's all-purpose miracle powder. They used it for cleaning clothes, preserving mummies, and brushing teeth. Yes, the same stuff they scrubbed linen with was also in their toothpaste, minty fresh and slightly chalky. Some scholars still argue whether natron's cleansing power was mostly chemical or ritual, but either way, it worked. A woman nearby hums a low tune as she rinses a priest's robe. Her hands are red from hours in the water, her wrists adorned with copper bracelets that glint in the sun. You can tell by her careful movements that this isn't just washing, it's almost a performance. Each garment, each fold, each rinse feels deliberate, as if to honor the gods who demand purity in every detail. The Nile's current shifts, carrying bits of foam downstream. A few children play near the edge, tossing wet linen like fishnets. A man calls out for them to keep clear. There are always crocodiles lurking in the murky green water. You glance nervously at the ripples and take a polite step back. Nothing ruins a laundry day quite like becoming the laundry. Egypt's geography made all of this possible. The annual floods left behind fertile soil and endless mud. People tracked that mud into their homes, temples, and clothes. The desert wind coated everything with fine dust. And since most garments were made of uncolored linen, even the tiniest smudge stood out like an accusation. You can imagine the quiet panic of a priest finding a dirt stain on his temple robe right before a ritual. There's a reason ancient art so often shows Egyptians in pristine white clothing. Cleanliness was a visual language. To appear spotless was to appear in order, part of Mont, the great cosmic balance that governed life and morality. Dirt, in contrast, hinted at chaos. So every wash in the Nile wasn't just practical, it was symbolic, a reaffirmation of one's place in a universe that prized harmony. But you can't help but chuckle when a gust of wind sends a freshly washed tunic tumbling straight into the river. The washer groans, then laughs. It's all part of the routine. Laundry day was social, too. People swapped stories, rumors, and recipes while their clothes soaked. One ancient scribe even complained on a fragment of papyrus about noisy washerwomen gossiping near his window. Historians still debate whether that was a real letter or just satire. Either way, it's proof that laundry chatter has always been timeless. You crouch near the shore and dip your fingers into the Nile. The water is surprisingly cool, silky, with a faint mineral tang. It's easy to imagine the relief of stepping into it after a day in the sun. The river isn't just a resource, it's a lifeline. Every wash, every rinse, every shimmer of fabric depends on this eternal current. Nearby, an old man beats a tunic with expert rhythm. He looks up, smiles with toothless warmth, and mutters something that sounds like advice, though you don't understand the words. Maybe he's telling you that no matter the century, some chores never change. As the sun sinks lower, the light softens, turning the air a deep gold. You hear laughter, splashes, and the faint rustle of drying linen. The day winds down slowly, lazily, the way only Egypt knows. You breathe in deeply, the scent of the Nile, the faint sweetness of lotus, and the earthy comfort of a world where washing clothes was both a necessity and an act of devotion. You stretch, feeling the heat fade from your skin. Somewhere far away, someone rings a bronze bell calling for evening prayers. The laundry is done, but the story, yours, Egypt's, humanity's endless battle against dust, is just beginning.
You wake, or maybe you never stopped drifting, under the relentless Egyptian sun. The air feels thick enough to chew, and even the shade of a palm tree offers only moral support. You tug lightly at your linen tunic, now dry but stiff, and realize that in ancient Egypt, sweat isn't just an inconvenience, it's a lifestyle. Everywhere around you, the world gleams in pale tones. Chalky white walls, honey-colored sand, the endless shimmer of linen robes fluttering in the heat. The Egyptians loved their linen, and for good reason. Cotton didn't exist here yet, and wool was considered far too hot and far too itchy for civilized comfort. So they spun flax into linen, lightweight, breathable, and mercifully cool. You can practically hear it whisper against your skin when the breeze stirs. But here's the problem. Linen is beautiful and soft, but it's also unforgiving. It stains easily, wrinkles dramatically, and broadcasts every drop of sweat like a confession. You can't hide a long walk in the sun, or a day at the market, or a particularly tense debate with your neighbor about whether cats are minor gods or just furry freeloaders. Your clothes tell the story. And because of that, laundry was as constant a rhythm as the Nile itself. Every household had to manage it. The wealthy, of course, had servants for the job. The poor, they were the servants. And you're somewhere in between, clutching a tunic that smells faintly of yesterday's natron rinse and wishing someone would invent deodorant. In Egypt, hygiene wasn't just about comfort, it was about identity. Ancient texts mentioned bathing multiple times a day, and washing clothes regularly was an extension of the same philosophy. The cleaner you looked, the closer you were to divine order. Ma'at, again, that elegant concept of balance and purity. Dirt wasn't just unsightly, it was spiritually suspicious. You wipe your brow and glance toward a nearby courtyard, where a small group of workers are sorting laundry for a wealthy household. They work with brisk efficiency, shaking out robes and examining each one for stains. The overseer, a wiry man with a reed pen tucked behind his ear, keeps a tally on a clay tablet. There's a certain irony in how much paperwork goes into staying clean. A woman nearby scrubs a tunic while muttering about the owner's unreasonable use of oil. You catch snippets of her words. 3 spots in one night? He thinks I have magic hands. She dunks the cloth again with theatrical sighs. Everyone laughs. You realize something endearing. Laundry might be tedious, but it's also social glue. Just like modern coffee breaks, these daily chores gave Egyptians time to talk, complain, flirt, and share news. Historians still argue whether most Egyptian homes had designated washing areas or if communal washing spots along canals were more common. The evidence, like most ancient laundry, is patchy. But one thing's certain. Everyone cared about their clothes. Tomb paintings often show servants folding and pressing linens with near religious care, while the deceased lounges nearby, forever spotless in the afterlife. You have to respect that commitment to presentation. Eternity, but make it wrinkle-free. The smell around you is surprisingly pleasant, a mix of clean water, crushed reeds, and the faint floral scent of lotus oil. Egyptians sometimes rubbed scented oils into their clothes to keep them fresh between washes. You picture an ancient version of a modern laundry ad, now with the fragrance of sacred lotus, and chuckle softly.
a teenage boy walks past carrying a pile of damp cloth on his shoulders. He's barefoot, sunburned, and whistling. His tunic is short and practical, easier for movement, and tied at the waist with a strip of linen. You can see why. Without that belt, you'd probably trip on your own hem while hauling laundry up from the riverbank. Nearby, a group of women are brushing wigs under the shade of a fig tree. Egyptians, both men and women, often shaved their heads to stay cool and clean, wearing wigs for style and ceremony. These wigs, made of human hair or plant fibers, also needed washing. You watch one woman carefully lay hers on a flat rock, then sprinkle it with natron and water, scrubbing gently as though she's polishing gold. She wrings it out, places it to dry, and sighs contentedly. Imagine that. Laundry day for your hair. You notice another curious detail. Despite the heat, nobody here smells unpleasant. The mix of oils, natron, and frequent washing has a surprisingly effective result. The Egyptians may not have invented antiperspirant, but they knew how to smell like civilization. Still, you can't help but feel for the workers. Washing clothes under the sun is brutal. The air wavers in ripples of heat, and even the donkeys waiting nearby look half asleep. One of the men jokes about moving the entire operation into the shade of a pyramid. Everyone laughs, mostly because it's too hot to cry. You start to picture daily life here more vividly. Mornings begin early before the heat becomes unbearable. Laundry is hauled to the river or a household basin, soaked, scrubbed, wrung out, and left to dry on flat roofs or racks made of woven reeds. In the afternoon, as the temperature peaks, people retreat indoors. Houses designed to stay cool with thick walls and narrow windows. The linen dries fast in this climate, and by evening, it's crisp, sun-bleached, and ready for use again. Sometimes, though, the heat is too much. You spot a man simply standing waist-deep in the Nile, holding his shirt underwater and letting the river do the work. It's lazy but effective. Another worker nearby frowns at him, muttering something about letting the fish wash your sins. You can't help but smiling. And then there's the question of color. Egyptians loved white linen, but not exclusively. Some wealthier citizens experimented with pale blues or yellows, achieved by vegetable dyes or mineral pigments. These colors were rare and expensive, like owning a luxury brand tunic today. Yet even the richest nobles still valued the simplicity of clean, pure white. It was, in a sense, their version of elegance. As you walk along the riverbank, a soft breeze stirs the drying linens, making them ripple like sails. For a moment, you imagine them catching the desert wind and floating away, a fleet of ghostly ships sailing toward eternity. The thought makes you smile sleepily. In the distance, temple bells echo faintly. People begin to gather their clean laundry, folding the stiff fabric with precision. You notice how proud they look. Clean clothes in hand, faces glowing with sweat and satisfaction. After all, in this ancient world, washing wasn't just maintenance, it was renewal. You stretch your arms, feeling the warmth on your skin. Somewhere behind you, the river murmurs on, eternal and indifferent. Tomorrow, the same people will be back, same stones, same stains, same laughter. The routine never changes, and maybe that's the comfort of it. Because in the rhythm of washing, rinsing, and drying, you sense something eternal, an unbroken thread connecting you, here and now, to lives lived thousands of years ago. The soap's different, the machines are new, but the feeling of clean linen against your skin, that's timeless.
The day drifts lazily forward, the sun climbing higher until the horizon ripples like a mirage. You follow the slow movement of the crowd toward the Nile's edge. Today it's busier than usual. Word has spread that the palace laundries are in full swing, which means every curious eye in Thebes wants to watch the ritual unfold. You find a spot near a cluster of women rinsing tunics, the water lapping gently at your ankles. The mud squishes between your toes, strangely cool, faintly metallic from the silt that makes the Nile both fertile and unpredictable. You're standing in what feels like the world's first laundromat, minus the soft pop music and questionable lighting. The river is alive with chatter, gossip, and laughter. Every few moments, someone beats a cloth against a stone with a satisfying whap, sending up tiny arcs of spray that catch the light like shattered glass. A few children dart among the washers, pretending to be crocodiles.
The adults shout mock warnings, though one woman keeps a sharp eye on the reeds, just in case. The washerfolk have their rhythm down to art. First, they soak the fabric in shallow baskets weighted with stones. Then comes the beating, steady, deliberate, a motion that both cleans and vents a lifetime's worth of frustration. Finally, the rinse. Clean water poured over each fold, the garment wrung out with practiced strength. Every so often, someone tosses a tunic into the air, letting the breeze do the first step of drying before it's laid across flat rocks or hung from papyrus stems. Historians still argue whether these scenes, depicted on countless tomb walls, were idealized or literal. Were the painted washerwomen real laborers or symbolic figures of purification? The evidence suggests both. In Egypt, cleanliness and holiness blurred together. To wash was to serve both body and spirit. Even the river itself was sacred, its waters a direct gift from the gods. A thin man with sun-leathered skin and sharp eyes sits nearby, smoking a reed pipe. He's watching the workers with quiet amusement. When he notices you, he chuckles and says something half-teasing. The river remembers more secrets than the pharaoh. You imagine he's right. The Nile has seen it all. Births, funerals, harvests, wars, and now laundry. Every rinse of fabric sends another layer of life back into its current. You move closer to the group, feeling the warm spray on your skin. The women talk as they work, voices rising and falling in a melody. They trade gossip about temple festivals, grumble about lazy husbands, and laugh about whose neighbor borrowed whose perfume again. It's the same symphony you'd hear today at a neighborhood laundromat, humans being gloriously human while the chores get done. One woman pauses to adjust her headscarf and leans toward you with a conspiratorial grin. Did you hear? The baker's daughter spilled wine on her festival dress. Red wine! She'll need 3 gods' blessings to fix that. Everyone laughs. You do too. It's comforting, this timeless sound of shared misfortune. The tools they use are simple, but ingenious. Smooth river stones for beating, woven baskets for carrying, clay jars for hauling water. No fancy contraptions, no soap suds. Just hands, rhythm, and patience. You can't help admiring the strength it takes. Some of these workers spend the entire day bent over the water, arms working tirelessly against the current. Their muscles gleam in the sun, sculpted by repetition. Laundry day here isn't a task, it's endurance training. Occasionally, someone hums a tune, a low, repetitive melody that blends with the slap of fabric and the gurgle of water. You catch fragments of lyrics about Ra guiding the sun, about the Nile's generosity, about stains washing away like sins. The connection between cleanliness and redemption runs deep. Every splash feels almost like a prayer. As the hours pass, the air thickens with humidity and heat. You wipe your brow and notice how the horizon shimmers, the dunes beyond the river blurring into molten gold. The water, though, remains cool. You dip your hands in again and feel the current tug gently. It's impossible not to feel humbled by this eternal river, patient, powerful, quietly watching as civilizations rise and fall on its banks. A boy wades in to help his mother. He's maybe 10, thin as a reed, his tunic hitched up to his knees. His laughter echoes as he tries to wring a tunic nearly as big as he is. She corrects him softly, showing how to twist without tearing the fabric. He fumbles, then finally gets it right, grinning proudly. She kisses his forehead. For a fleeting moment, it's as if the centuries fold in on themselves, every family in every age teaching the same small lessons of care and patience. You notice one washerwoman wearing an amulet, shaped like an eye, the Eye of Horus. She dips it into the water now and then, murmuring something under her breath. Perhaps it's superstition, or perhaps a kind of insurance policy against losing a garment to the crocodiles. Historians debate whether such rituals were truly magical or just comforting habits passed through generations. Either way, it's a reminder that even in the most practical of tasks, the Egyptians always left room for mystery. Not far downstream, a group of men in loincloths are cleaning the linens used in a local temple. These garments, destined for priests, must be spotless, no stain, no wrinkle, no imperfection. They scrub with almost reverent intensity, occasionally pausing to hold a cloth up to the light for inspection. You wonder if they realize their small act of washing connects them to something cosmic, the endless loop of cleansing and renewal that defined Egyptian life. A gust of wind picks up, sending the smell of wet linen and silt swirling around you. The sound of laughter fades into a gentle rhythm. Slap, rinse, wring, repeat. You find yourself hypnotized by the motion, lulled by the soft cadence of hands and water. The heat, the sound, the scent, it all begins to blur into a single sleepy hum. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the breeze wash over your face. In that instant, you can almost believe that time itself pauses here, suspended between two ripples of the Nile. When you open your eyes again, the sun has dipped lower. The workers are gathering their baskets, their laughter mellowed by fatigue. They leave the shore spotless, the stones gleaming wet and warm. Tomorrow, they'll return, and the same rhythm will play out again. And you, standing there with your feet in the ancient mud, can't help thinking there's something beautiful in the repetition. Laundry day might look ordinary, but in Egypt, even the ordinary had a touch of eternity.
The next morning, the Nile wakes before you do. Its low whisper rolls across the valley as fishermen cast their nets and ibis birds stride through the shallows like gossiping old men. You stretch, brush a thin layer of desert dust from your tunic, and realize it's already time to wash again. Laundry here isn't a once-a-week ordeal, it's an endless negotiation with the elements. As you walk toward the water, a group of workers are preparing the ingredients for today's cleansing concoction. There's no bar soap, no bubbly foam, and certainly no lavender-scented detergent. Instead, there's natron, that pale, salty mineral Egyptians prized like gold. You recognize it instantly, a chalky mix of sodium carbonate, sodium bicarbonate, and a dash of desert magic. It glitters faintly in the sunlight as a woman scoops it from a woven basket. She mixes it into a clay basin with a practiced hand, adding just enough river water to make a paste. The smell is sharp, clean, and slightly alkaline, something between baking soda and lightning. She grins at you and says, "Good for clothes, better for spirits." You nod, pretending to understand the full wisdom of that statement. Historians still argue whether the Egyptians discovered natron's cleaning powers by accident or divine experimentation. One theory suggests that they noticed how animal remains left near dry lake beds became oddly preserved, and then thought, if it can keep a goose fresh, maybe it'll work on my tunic. Another theory claims priests first used natron in ritual purification, then spread the habit to daily life. Either way, it stuck, literally and figuratively. The woman rubs the mixture into a tunic, her hands moving in steady circles. She says it pulls out the dirt and what the eyes can't see. You watch as tiny grains of sand and dust rise to the surface, mingling with foamless water. She rinses the garment, wrings it, and hangs it across a wooden pole. It dries almost instantly in the morning heat. Next to her, a man experiments with another method. He's using clay, smooth river mud mixed with ash. It looks dubious, but he insists it absorbs oils better than natron alone. He says, "For the greasy stains," holding up a tunic blotched with what might be olive oil or something more mysterious. He rubs the mud into the fabric with the seriousness of a priest performing a ritual, then dunks it into the Nile. The mud peels away, taking the stain with it. You have to admit, it works. Somewhere, a detergent company should be taking notes. The scent of crushed lotus petals wafts through the air as another worker adds a floral touch to the rinse water. Egyptians adored their lotus. It symbolized rebirth and purity, blooming fresh each morning from the muddy depths. Adding it to laundry water wasn't just for fragrance. It was a small prayer to keep life beautiful, even in the mundane. You kneel to help, cautiously sprinkling natron into a small bowl. It fizzles slightly as it touches the damp cloth. The worker beside you nods approvingly.
"Good," he says. "The cloth must sigh before it shines." You're not sure what that means, but it sounds poetic enough to remember. Around you, the scene is both chaotic and oddly serene. Clay pots clink, women hum, and every few moments someone bursts out laughing at a shared joke. Laundry here isn't mechanical. It's alive, human, full of rhythm. The beat of fabric against stone blends with the splash of water, forming a cadence older than any drum. You notice that even in this dusty corner of history, the Egyptians had a knack for multitasking. While the clothes soak, someone grinds barley for bread nearby. A young girl fans a brazier where perfume oils heat gently over coals. The scent of myrrh mingles with natron dust, creating a strangely luxurious smell for such a humble task. And then, because this is ancient Egypt, someone brings up the gods. An elderly man, his beard as white as the linen he's folding, gestures toward the sky. "The gods love what is clean," he says. "Ra rises pure each morning. We must greet him the same way." His voice carries authority, though his tunic looks suspiciously stained. Still, nobody argues. Historians often describe ancient Egyptian religion as a blend of devotion and daily routine. To live rightly was to stay clean, physically, morally, cosmically. Washing wasn't just practical, it was theology in motion. The water of the Nile was believed to hold divine energy, capable of rinsing away not only dirt, but disorder itself. You can almost hear the unspoken prayer in every splash. A young scribe appears at the edge of the group, clutching a small tablet. He's recording recipes for cleaning mixtures, perhaps for the household archives. Natron and ash, plus one measure of lotus crushed, maybe two. He glances at you, squinting. "Do you think 2 sounds excessive?" You shrug. He sighs and writes 1.5. Bureaucracy never changes. The laughter returns when someone slips on a wet stone and lands with a splash. The group roars with delight. Even the stern old man chuckles, shaking his head. Ra forgives the clumsy, but not the lazy. You take note. A little soap, a little philosophy. As the morning deepens, the water sparkles brighter and the air grows thick with the mingled smells of earth, salt, and flowers. A soft wind stirs, carrying away the scent of natron and damp linen. You find yourself staring at the ripples, mesmerized by how the sunlight dances over them. It's easy to forget time here. The rhythm of washing, the gentle chatter, and the shimmer of water, it's all part of the same eternal heartbeat. By midday, the workers pause to eat. Flatbread, dates, and beer. They sit in the shade, fanning themselves with woven reeds. Someone passes you a piece of bread in a clay cup. You take a sip, surprised by the sweet tang. The man beside you grins and says, "Beer for strength and courage to face another stain." You raise your cup in mock salute, and everyone laughs again. It's a good sound. Warm, human, timeless. You realize that in the clamor of ancient Egypt, amid temples, pyramids, and dynasties, the humblest tasks carried the deepest peace. And as you lean back against a sun-baked stone, half dreaming, half awake, you realize something profound. The Egyptians didn't invent laundry just to stay clean. They invented it to stay connected, to each other, to the river, and to the quiet rhythm of the gods.
The sun tilts higher, painting the Nile gold, and the air thickens with heat. You wipe a streak of sweat from your neck and notice how the temple bells echo faintly across the city. The washerfolk have quieted now. Most are packing up, leaving the river to the sacred hands who arrive next. You follow them from a distance, curious because these aren't ordinary launderers. These are the temple attendants, the ones who scrub the linens of gods. The closer you get, the quieter the air becomes. Even the birds seem to hush. The Temple of Karnak looms ahead, its columns towering like petrified sunbeams. You're not here to worship exactly. You're here to see the divine version of Laundry Day. It's less about cleaning fabric and more about maintaining cosmic order. Inside the temple courtyard, rows of priests move with measured grace.
Their shaved heads glisten, their white linen kilts crisp and spotless. Every gesture feels choreographed. They don't simply wash garments, they purify them. Each basin of water is drawn from the Nile at dawn and blessed with whispered prayers. Each cloth that touches the liquid becomes a conduit of balance. Ma'at, the sacred harmony between chaos and order. You watch one priest carefully submerge a strip of temple linen. His fingers barely ripple the water. "Everything that serves the gods must be reborn clean," he murmurs, "even if it was only used once." You nod, thinking about your own tunic, still drying somewhere in the sun, far less sacred but possibly twice as dirty. Historians still argue whether this ritual cleansing was strictly religious or also a bit of early hygiene. Some claim the priests were unknowingly enforcing one of the first public health standards. After all, daily bathing and garment washing would have made temples the cleanest places in Egypt. Others insist the practice was purely spiritual, cleanliness as proof of devotion. Either way, the result is the same. The gleam of linen in candlelight, a sight so pure it almost hums. The head priest oversees everything, his movements smooth, almost musical. He inspects each washed cloth, then places it on a flat reed mat to dry. You notice that these linens aren't just any fabric, they're hand-woven, bleached under the relentless sun for days, and sometimes even embroidered with gold thread for temple statues. You imagine the sweat behind all that shine, the hours spent scrubbing, rinsing, drying, folding, all to ensure that when Ra rises, his image is dressed in radiance. Nearby, two young novices struggle with a load of ceremonial sashes. They whisper nervously, trying not to splash. "If you stain it, they'll make you copy hymns for a week." You grin silently. Even sacred laundry has consequences. You step closer to a side chamber where a different kind of purification unfolds. Here, the air smells of incense and natron. A priest dips his hands into a basin and sprinkles water over a folded robe while chanting words that sound like the soft rolling of river waves. You catch fragments: pure hands, pure heart, pure linen. It's hypnotic, a lullaby for the gods themselves. The priests wash not only garments, but also ritual tools, altars, and statues. Natron is everywhere, on their fingers, on their lips, even in their prayers. In fact, ancient Egyptian embalmers used the same mineral to dry the bodies of the dead, preserving them for eternity. Life, death, and laundry, strange companions sharing the same ingredient. You can't help but smirk at the thought. Imagine explaining that to a modern detergent commercial. New Natron Plus, good enough for pharaohs, great for mummies. A gust of hot wind sweeps through the courtyard, fluttering the clean linens like banners of light. For a moment, the entire space glows, 1,000 tiny suns swaying in the air. You stand there, motionless, feeling oddly peaceful. You realize that in this civilization obsessed with eternity, every small act of renewal matters. Washing a cloth, lighting a candle, polishing a statue, it's all part of the same cosmic rinse cycle. A senior priest walks past, his expression serene. The gods do not need our cleaning, but we need the act of cleaning them. His words hang in the air like incense smoke, faintly sweet, faintly sad. You think about the people outside the temple, washing clothes for survival, and these men inside, washing for salvation. Two worlds bound by the same rhythm of water and dust. A group of workers enter, carrying baskets of fresh linens for the temple's inner sanctum. You help them lift the load, out of politeness mostly, and follow them through a shaded corridor where torchlight flickers. The walls are covered in carvings of lotus flowers, waves, and sun disks, all symbols of rebirth. It hits you that this isn't just laundry, it's mythology turned into muscle memory. When the last cloth is folded, the priests bow their heads in silence. You do the same, feeling strangely reverent. The water left in the basins is carried outside and poured into the sand, never wasted, but never reused. It returns to the earth,
one novice explains. The Nile will reclaim it. Outside again, the heat wraps around you like a blanket. The everyday washerfolk are gone, replaced by silence and the faint scent of myrrh. You sit by the temple steps, gazing at the faint shimmer of the river in the distance. Somewhere downstream, women still beat clothes against stones, laughing under the sun. Up here, men whisper blessings over fabric fit for gods. Yet both, in their own way, are chasing the same dream: to make the impure pure again. You breathe deeply, the air thick with dust and divinity. There's something humbling in realizing that even the most powerful civilization in history still had to do laundry and treated it like an act of faith. Maybe that's the secret they knew, that the path to eternity starts with a clean shirt.
You leave the temple behind and wander back toward the river, where the everyday world hums again, less sacred, more chaotic. The washerfolk are already at work, splashing water, laughing, complaining, swatting flies. You pause under the shade of a palm tree, watching the rhythm of ordinary Egypt return. This is where the real laundry happens, the gritty kind that doesn't smell of incense, but of sweat and survival. You spot one man crouched at the riverbank, beating a tunic against a smooth rock. His motions are steady, almost meditative. Every few strikes, he dips the cloth, squeezes, and swings it again, sending droplets flying like glass in the sun. "You'll bruise it if you hit too hard," someone calls out, half joking, half serious. Laundry here is a community affair, a social performance of necessity. You edge closer and see that each washer, usually men in this part of the Nile, has a designated patch of riverbank, worn smooth by generations of scrubbing. They trade jokes, gossip about temple politics, and occasionally burst into teasing songs about whose linen dries fastest. You get the feeling it's not so different from modern office chatter, just wetter, louder, and with a lot more crocodile risk. Historians still argue whether professional washermen in ancient Egypt were free laborers, state workers, or something in between. Some suggest they belonged to guild-like groups attached to temples or palaces, paid partly in bread and beer. Others think they were independent hustlers, taking in other people's clothes for a few copper shards per basket. Either way, their job was backbreaking and strangely intimate. After all, they handled the dirt of everyone, from priests to bricklayers. You crouch beside a young washer, no older than 20. His name, he says, is Menka. His hands are calloused, his tunic soaked, but his grin wide. "You from Thebes?" he asks casually, wringing out a robe. You shake your head. "Doesn't matter," he adds. "Laundry smells the same everywhere." You both laugh at that. It's true in a tragic, universal sort of way. Menka explains the day's rhythm. Wake before dawn, fetch water, haul laundry from households or workshops, then scrub until the sun stands high. The heat dries the fabric almost instantly, which helps, but also cracks the skin on their hands until it peels. You get used to it, he says, flexing his fingers. You stop feeling the sting after a while. You notice a scar along his forearm. He waves it off. "Crocodile," he says nonchalantly, as if mentioning a mosquito bite. "Tried to take my bucket. I took it back." He chuckles. You can't tell if he's serious or just spinning a riverside legend for the stranger watching him work. Either way, you're impressed and slightly more cautious about dipping your own toes in. As Menka works, he hums a tune, low and rhythmic, matching the beat of cloth against stone. It sounds almost like a heartbeat. Around him, the washermen form a kind of percussive orchestra: thump, slap, rinse, squeeze, accompanied by the hiss of the river and the distant bray of donkeys hauling baskets of clean linen to dry. Nearby, two women are washing children's clothes in shallower water. They're not professionals, just mothers, who've turned laundry into a kind of social ritual. One complains about her husband's sand-cacked sandals. The other teases that he should just wash in the river with the clothes. You smile. Some jokes truly survive millennia. The washerfolk have developed their own tricks. They soak heavily soiled tunics in a mix of natron and ash overnight.
They scrub stains with crushed limestone. For white garments, they spread them across sand to bleach in the relentless sunlight. Their methods are simple but effective, each move refined through centuries of trial, error, and sunburn. You ask Menka whether he ever tires of it all. He shrugs. He says, "The river gives and the river takes. We just work between those two moments." There's wisdom in that, the kind you don't learn in temples or scrolls. At midday, the washerfolk take a break, sitting in the shade to eat flatbread dipped in oil and share jugs of beer, thick, yeasty, half-liquid stuff that's more meal than drink. The smell drifts toward you, mingling with damp linen and mud. It's strangely comforting. Menka tells a story about a noblewoman who once complained that her tunic came back with wrinkles. "She wanted me to iron it?" he snorts. "With what? The sun?" Everyone laughs. You can almost hear echoes of workplace grumbling from every age. Unreasonable customers, tight deadlines, impossible expectations. Some things never change. When the meal ends, they return to work. The heat has peaked now, the light harsh enough to make the air itself seem white. The washers squint and press on, their shadows shrinking beneath them. You find yourself silently cheering them on, these unsung heroes of civilization. Without them, the immaculate priests, perfumed nobles, and radiant pharaohs would all be walking around smelling like the back end of a donkey. There's a quiet nobility to their work, though no one calls it that. Every slap of cloth is a small act of defiance against decay, dust, and time. You watch as Menka finishes his final piece, rings it one last time, and spreads it flat across a sunlit rock. The linen gleams like snow against the ochre landscape, a fleeting miracle of whiteness in a world built on sand. As the day wanes, the washerfolk pack their tools and baskets, slinging them over tired shoulders. The river glows orange now, reflecting the sunset like molten copper. Menka waves goodbye. "Tomorrow," he calls out, "the dirt returns." You nod, understanding perfectly. Because that's the truth of it, isn't it? Laundry is never finished. It's a loop. Wash, wear, sweat, wash again. Maybe that's why the Egyptians saw cleanliness as sacred. It wasn't just about purity. It was about persistence. The willingness to start over again and again, even when the desert keeps throwing dust in your face. You watch them fade into the dusk, their laughter mixing with the soft murmur of the river. The last ripple glints in the fading sun, and for a moment the Nile looks like a silver thread being wrung dry by the hands of eternity.
You rise early the next morning, before the light sharpens, when the sky is still the color of cool linen. The air feels different at dawn, softer, cleaner, like the world itself has just been rinsed and hung up to dry. You wander through the waking city, past the smell of bread baking in clay ovens, and head toward the market square, where bolts of linen catch the first sunlight. Linen, it's everywhere. It drapes from stalls, wraps around children, even lines the coffins of the dead. You start to understand why Laundry Day held such weight here. In Egypt, linen wasn't just fabric, it was identity. Cotton and wool were for other lands, too warm, too coarse, too foreign. Linen, made from the flax that thrived along the Nile, was the perfect desert fabric. Light, breathable, and endlessly renewable. As you trail a merchant unloading bales of flax fiber, the smell hits you. Earthy, faintly grassy, almost sweet. He spreads his wares and grins at you. "The gods love linen," he says. You believe him. Every statue of Osiris, every painted scene of the afterlife shows souls wearing the same white folds. The color wasn't random. It symbolized purity, light, the triumph of order over chaos. You finger a strip of fabric. It's so fine you can see light through it, yet strong enough to last decades. Good linen, the merchant boasts, never truly dies. It just changes owners. You chuckle, thinking of how that might also apply to cats, or maybe secrets. Historians still argue whether ancient Egyptians bleached their linen intentionally or simply let the desert sun do the work. Some suggest they used a primitive alkaline solution,
natron again, that miracle mineral, to strip color and enhance brightness. Others think the pure white tone came naturally from repeated washing and years of careful sun drying. Either way, it worked. The gleam of Egyptian linen became legendary across the ancient world. As you stroll deeper into the market, you see people of every class comparing fabrics. A noblewoman's servant holds up a near-transparent shawl, muttering about thread count. A craftsman bargains over coarser stuff for work tunics. Even a laborer buying the cheapest weave runs his fingers across it with pride. In a society where wealth could be measured in gold, freshness could still earn respect. You imagine walking through Thebes or Memphis on festival day, streets gleaming white as sunlight bounces off thousands of freshly laundered robes. It must have been dazzling, almost blinding, like being inside a cloud made of linen. Fashion here had layers, literally. Men wore short kilts or longer tunics depending on status. Women favored pleated dresses so fine they clung like mist. Some outfits were deliberately transparent, showing off physique or jewelry. It wasn't scandalous, it was art. Clean skin, clean cloth, clean soul. You run into Menka again, your washer friend from the day before. His arms are full of folded robes, all white as moonlight. He grins when he sees you. "For the festival," he says proudly. "Everyone wants to look like a god." You help him carry the load back to his employer's house. Inside, the courtyard buzzes with activity. Servants are ironing. Well, sort of. They're using smooth clay rollers, pressing them back and forth to flatten creases. Others shake out linens and hang them on reed lines, careful not to let them touch the ground. The smell is heavenly. Sun, soap, and a faint trace of lotus oil. You notice the mistress of the house inspecting each tunic closely, holding them up to the light. "Whiter than the moon," she murmurs approvingly. You wonder if she knows, or cares, how many hours under the sun, how many scraped knuckles went into that sheen. As the day wears on, you follow Menka through the neighborhood. You see nobles lounging in courtyards, their linen robes so white they seem to glow. You see workers heading to the fields, their garments simpler, but still freshly washed. You even spot a group of children running around in oversized hand-me-down tunics, laughing and filthy already, tiny reminders that laundry day is temporary by design. There's something deeply human in it, you think, the endless cycle of getting dirty, then striving to be clean again. It mirrors life itself, a repetition of effort and imperfection. The Egyptians, of all people, seem to understand that balance better than most. Later you visit a small workshop where weavers sit at looms, their feet working petals, their fingers feeding flax threads. One woman hums softly as she works. You ask her if she ever gets tired of seeing so much white. She smiles. "White is not empty," she says. "It shows everything. The fold, the light, the work of the hands." You file that thought away in your mind. It's the sort of thought that stays with you when you're half asleep, the kind that hums faintly like river water. By sunset, the city glows again, not from fire, but from fabric. The people look like walking lanterns, lit from within. The cool evening wind flutters sleeves and hems, filling the streets with a soft rustling sound, as if all of Egypt were sighing in satisfaction. You realize something. These people didn't just wash clothes, they worshipped the state of being freshly laundered. The purity of linen wasn't vanity, it was philosophy. To wear clean linen was to be in tune with the gods, to stand upright in the balance of life and death, to reflect the sun's order rather than the desert's chaos. You smile, looking at Menka's gleaming robes, at the fluttering fabrics, at the distant shimmer of the Nile. For the first time, you really understand why Egyptian art painted everything so bright, so deliberate. They weren't obsessed with color, they were obsessed with clarity. And maybe, just maybe, that's why they never saw laundry as drudgery. To them, it was art, the art of staying luminous in a dusty world.
The air in the market grows heavier by mid-morning, full of the scent of sun-warmed linen and something sweeter drifting between the stalls. You follow the smell until you reach a low booth shaded by woven mats. Clay jars are lined up neatly along the counter, some sealed with wax, others left open so that the breeze carries their perfume into the street. A merchant, his hands glistening with oil, waves you closer.
Perfume for your linens? He asks with a grin. Or perhaps for yourself. Either way, the gods appreciate a good scent. You lean in to look. Inside the jars, translucent liquids swirl in colors ranging from gold to pale green. The merchant dips a reed stick into one and lets a drop fall onto your wrist. The aroma is delicate. Cedar, lotus, and something faintly smoky. He watches your reaction. This one's called Breath of the Marshes. Makes even the dirtiest tunic smell like the Garden of Ra. You can't help smiling. Of course, ancient Egyptians didn't stop at clean. They wanted their clothes to smell divine. Washing was only half the ritual. Perfuming was the art that followed. He opens another jar and gestures for you to try. Myrrh and honey. Soothes the fabric, keeps the insects away too. You dab a drop onto your palm. It's thick, resinous, comforting, somewhere between medicine and magic. Historians still argue whether perfumed oils were used purely for pleasure or also for preservation. Some believe the oils helped seal linen fibers against dust and insects, while others say the scent served as a kind of spiritual armor, each fragrance tied to a specific deity or mood. Either way, the Egyptians mastered the science of smelling good long before modern perfume counters existed. Behind the stall, 2 apprentices are grinding ingredients in a mortar: frankincense resin, rose petals, and what looks like crushed almonds. The rhythmic sound of pestle on stone blends with the hum of the market. You notice how careful they are with proportions, adding a drop of oil, a splash of water, a pinch of natron. It's chemistry and ceremony all at once. The merchant hands you a small linen pouch. For storing clothes, he says, filled with herbs, keeps them fresh even in flood season. You lift it to your nose. Mint, lemongrass, and something earthy, maybe fenugreek. Even the pharaoh's laundry, he adds proudly, smells like this. You raise an eyebrow. You supply the palace? He laughs. No, he admits. But my cousin's neighbor once sold oil to someone who did. Close enough, you suppose. Further down the street, another vendor is boiling something in a large copper pot. You peek inside and see a creamy mixture bubbling away. Donkey milk, she says without looking up. Softens linen, makes it shine. The smell isn't exactly pleasant, but she seems convinced of its power. Cleopatra swore by it, she adds, for her skin and her sheets. You think about that as she ladles the mixture into clay jars. Maybe luxury always finds a way, even in the age before silk pillowcases. Around the corner, a young woman is hanging washed tunics on a line, sprinkling each with water scented by crushed lotus. As she works, she hums softly, a tune so calm you feel your shoulders drop just listening to it. She notices your gaze and smiles. It's easier to sleep, she says, when the air smells kind. You watch as she folds the dry garments, layering sachets of herbs between them. The scent is light but constant, a blend of myrrh, rose, and Nile mud. It's not perfume in the modern sense. It's the smell of clean, done right. At a nearby stall, you see a recipe carved on a tablet fragment displayed like treasure. The inscription reads something like, oil of cedar, myrrh, cinnamon, mixed with animal fat and lotus juice. It's one of the earliest recorded perfume formulas in history. You imagine some scribe dutifully copying it down while sneezing from all the spice fumes. You take a moment to picture an average Egyptian household during laundry day. After washing and drying, someone, maybe a servant or maybe the lady of the house herself, would rub perfumed oil between her palms and then slowly smooth it over each fold of linen before storing it away. Every tunic became a tiny shrine of scent. Of course, not all additives were glamorous. Menka, your ever-honest washer friend,
once mentioned that poorer families sometimes used mashed onions or sour beer as softeners. "It keeps away flies," he said with a grin, "and sometimes people, too." You'd laugh then, assuming he was joking, but now you're not so sure. You pass a group of priests purchasing bundles of papyrus and jars of oil. One of them remarks, "The gods love cedar more than gold." It's not a metaphor. Cedar oil was prized for its antiseptic qualities, used both in mummification and in cleaning sacred linens. The same scent that anointed the dead also perfumed the living. There's something beautifully cyclical about that. By late afternoon, the entire market smells like a garden that's been set gently on fire. Smoke, spice, sweetness. The sun bakes the stone walls, amplifying every aroma until the air itself feels fragrant. You walk back toward the river, the scent of lotus following you like a ghost. At the riverbank, Menka is rinsing the last batch of laundry. You toss him the small pouch of herbs you bought earlier. "For the smell," you say. He sniffs it, squints, and nods approvingly. "Smells expensive." Then he tosses it into the rinse water with a flourish. Now it's royal laundry. You laugh, watching the ripples spread across the surface. For a moment, everything seems suspended. The glimmering river, the white linen fluttering on the shore, and the golden haze of sunset. You inhale deeply. Beneath the scent of oils and flowers, you can still smell the Nile itself. Muddy, ancient, alive. It's the same smell, you realize, that every Egyptian knew. The perfume of work, water, and persistence. A scent that says, today, at least, the dust, lost.
The palace looms above the river like a mirage, its walls glowing with the soft gold of late afternoon. From this distance, you'd never guess that deep inside those marble courtyards, the pharaoh's linen undergoes its own private ceremony of washing, one as sacred as any prayer offered at dawn. You're escorted by a quiet servant through the palace gates. The smell of incense greets you first. Sandalwood and frankincense curling through the air, thick enough to taste. The servant leads you past columns carved with lotus blossoms, their shadows long and cool on the polished floor. "Laundry," he whispers, "for the gods and the king." You step into a large chamber open to the sky, where sunlight spills down like a golden waterfall. There are no washerfolk here beating clothes against stones. Instead, you see a circle of temple attendants, dressed in spotless linen, kneeling beside shallow alabaster basins. Their movements are slow, deliberate, almost reverent. Each robe they handle is pure white, bordered with faint threads of gold. These are the pharaoh's garments, woven from the finest flax, light enough to ripple with every breath of air. A priest lifts one gently, as if afraid to bruise it, and lowers it into the basin. The water ripples with a faint shimmer. You notice it's not just water. Floating on its surface are petals, bits of crushed natron, and a few drops of oil so pure they shine like pearls. The priest murmurs a prayer under his breath. May Ra's light cleanse this fabric. May Mot's balance guard its threads. His tone makes it sound less like laundry, more like a spell. Beside him, another attendant fans the garment with palm leaves, helping it dry without ever touching the ground. No common line drying here. The sun does the work, and time obeys. You ask softly, "Do the pharaoh's clothes need to be purified every day?" The servant nods, twice on festival days. He smiles faintly as if recalling a familiar ritual. The king wears the scent of divinity. Anything less would offend the gods. You can almost see it, the morning ceremony when attendants present freshly laundered robes to the pharaoh. Before dressing, he would bathe in scented water, his skin oiled with frankincense. Then, as the linen settled over his shoulders, the first priests would light incense and speak blessings for victory, fertility, and order. In that moment, the pharaoh wasn't just clean, he was renewed, reborn in the eyes of heaven. It sounds excessive, maybe, but in this world, cleanliness was never just hygiene. It was harmony. Dirt meant decay, chaos, the creeping approach of disorder. Cleanliness meant balance. You catch sight of an older woman at the far side of the courtyard, her hands wrinkled but steady. She's folding the finished robes, layering them with thin sheets of papyrus and sprinkling each fold with crushed lotus. When she notices you watching, she says, "Even the sun must rest clean before it sets." Then she smiles, revealing teeth stained with herbs, and continues her work. A few attendants are polishing the floor around a carved drain where the used water flows away. You notice something glinting in the runoff, tiny flakes of gold. The servant explains, "Sometimes for the pharaoh's festival robes, they add dust from temple offerings, powdered gold mixed with oil. The gods see the shine, not the cost." At the chamber's edge, an apprentice records the process on papyrus scrolls. How long the soaking took, which oils were used, how much natron per basin. Every step is logged, a blend of devotion and documentation. Cleanliness is a form of history here, not written in ink, but in scent and ritual. You step closer to one of the basins. The water is still, except for a slow swirl of light. You realize what's floating there. Fragments of blue lapis lazuli. To bless the cloth, the servant says, blue is the color of eternity. And suddenly you understand, this isn't just laundry, it's the act of recreating order in miniature. Every robe washed, every fiber purified, is a promise renewed between the earth and the divine. Outside, the Nile hums beyond the walls, carrying the songs of ordinary washerfolk downstream. Here, inside, silence reigns, broken only by the drip of water, the soft whisper of linen folding, and the occasional flare of incense. When the final garment is hung, a priest steps forward with a silver bowl. He pours the remaining scented water over the courtyard floor, murmuring words of gratitude. You can't make out the full phrase, but one word repeats again and again: Nefer, beautiful, good, pure. The servant leans close. The pharaoh's robes must never know imperfection, for when he wears them, Egypt wears order. You think of the washermen by the river, beating linen against rocks and laughing in the sun. You think of the perfumers, the market scents, the donkeys and dust. All of it, every scrape, every wash, is part of the same rhythm. A rhythm that ends here in quiet perfection. As you leave, the sound of water lingers in your ears. The air smells faintly of cedar and honey. Somewhere behind you, another robe is being lowered into the basin. The chant begins again, steady as breath, ancient as the river itself. May the light of Ra cleanse. May the heart of Ma'at remain true. May linen, flesh, and soul all be pure. The sound fades as the corridor swallows you, leaving only the echo of water and the distant rustle of linen drying under the sacred sun.
You leave the palace behind and wander toward the outskirts of the city, where the sound of running water mingles with the rhythmic thud of fabric against stone. This is where laundry becomes less ceremony and more survival, a daily choreography of buckets, basins, and back-breaking effort. You step onto a low bank lined with flat slabs of limestone, perfectly arranged for washing. The stones gleam with moisture and use, polished smooth by thousands of palms and thousands more garments. The air smells faintly of wet flax and river mud. A washerman gestures to you with a grin and says something about the real work of Egypt. He's half joking, half serious. You roll up your sleeves and kneel beside him, your knees immediately finding the heat that's been baked into the stones all morning. He hands you a piece of linen, still stiff with dried sweat and sand. "Beat it like you mean it," he says. You do. The slap of the cloth against the stone echoes through the air, mixing with a dozen others, a kind of primitive drumbeat that keeps time with the river. The rhythm feels almost meditative. Slap, fold, rinse. Slap, fold, rinse. It's the same beat that's been heard here for 3,000 years. What surprises you most isn't the violence of it, it's the method. The washerfolk don't just scrub, they dance.
They twist the cloth with their feet, stomp it in tubs like grapes, and wring it tight enough to squeeze out the desert itself. Their arms and calves ripple with muscle, the kind born from repetition, not vanity. Nearby, a group of women sing to keep pace. The lyrics are half practical, half poetic. Beat the cloth, beat the dust, let the Nile carry all that's unjust. The song fades into laughter. Someone tosses a bucket of water and nearly splashes you. Laundry, you realize, is Egypt's original social network. Everyone's here. The potter's wife, the brewer's apprentice, a pair of temple attendants sneaking gossip about priests. Even a little child joins in, pretending to scrub a rag no bigger than his hand. A little farther upriver, you spot a series of wooden troughs and stone basins connected by narrow channels. The water trickles from one to the next, creating a gentle cascade. The washerman explains that the channels are cut to catch the cleanest part of the flow before the mud settles. Some are even angled towards small pools that collect runoff for irrigation. That's when it clicks. Ancient laundry wasn't just physical, it was engineering. Egyptians understood water management better than almost any civilization. They used gravity and the Nile's natural slope to wash, rinse, and reuse water efficiently. Historians still argue whether these systems were planned by local craftsmen or designed by temple overseers, but either way, they worked astonishingly well. You can see the evidence right here: the steady current, the careful layout, the lack of waste. And the tools? Surprisingly advanced. Wooden paddles shaped like oars for stirring wet linen, smooth stones for pressing out wrinkles, even early strainers made of woven reed used to remove sand and natron from rinse water. You pick up one of the paddles. It's heavy, smooth, worn to a silvery sheen. Imagine the hands that held it before yours, centuries of them, all performing the same small miracle, turning dirty, sun-baked linen into something worthy of being worn again. "Not all washing happens here," the washerman says, resting on his heels. He points toward the city. Big houses have their own basins, the temples, many basins. He's right. Some wealthier homes had miniature drainage systems, clay pipes leading from small washrooms to nearby canals. Servants could wash robes indoors, protected from the glare. Of course, that luxury didn't make the job easier, only hotter. And then there's drying. You'd expect lines of rope, but no, most people use the desert itself. They spread the garments over sand or bushes, flipping them often to keep the color bright. The trick, they say, is to let the sun dry the cloth, but not bleach it too quickly. Linen is picky like that. You run your fingers through one of the clean cloths fluttering nearby. It's astonishing how soft it feels, even without modern fabric softeners. The secret, your new friend explains, lies in the Nile's minerals. The combination of calcium and salt gives linen a natural crispness, Egypt's accidental brand of perfection. A woman nearby laughs when she hears that. "Accidental," she teases. "No, that's the gods making up for the heat." Everyone chuckles. The sound is friendly, warm, timeless. You take a moment to watch the system in motion. So many steps, each one small and humble, yet together forming something beautiful. The hauling, the soaking, the beating, the rinsing, the laying out to dry. It's all perfectly balanced, almost ritualistic. You can almost imagine some architect of old standing here, sketching plans for a temple's waterworks, and realizing, it's just like laundry. By the time the last cloth is wrung and folded, the sun has begun to dip low, painting everything in molten gold. The workers stretch their backs, shake out their hands, and sit together on the bank. Someone opens a jar of beer, thick, grainy, sweet. Another passes around dates and roasted chickpeas. You sip and realize that laundry day here isn't just about cleaning fabric, it's about resetting the rhythm of life. The Nile washes everything, not just linen, the week's worries, the dust of work, the noise of the city. Every rinse is a small renewal. You lie back for a moment, watching the water catch the light. It ripples gently, like the folds of the pharaoh's own robe. And for a fleeting second, the world feels simple. Just you, the river, and the sound of linen breathing in the sun.
You're still by the river when the first hint of twilight slides over the water. The day's work is ending, but something subtle changes in the air. Laughter softens, songs fade, and talk drifts toward the unseen. This is when laundry, once pure labor, begins to blend with myth. An older woman with a deep, sun-lined face dips a final robe into the water. She hums quietly, something between a prayer and a lullaby. You edge closer, careful not to break her rhythm. Her words aren't meant for you, they're meant for the river. White as Ra's eye, smooth as Ma'at's truth. Let no shadow cling, she murmurs. It's a charm, a spell whispered into the rinse. You've heard of these before, though most people call them old women's nonsense. Still, when you see the way others nearby fall silent as she speaks, you sense that nonsense has power here. For Egyptians, cleanliness wasn't just physical, it was moral, even magical. Dirt invited decay, and decay meant disorder, the creeping chaos that the god Seth represented. Cleanliness, therefore, wasn't vanity. It was defense. You ask the washerman from earlier whether he believes the charm is actually work. He grins and shrugs. Maybe not for the linen, he says, but it keeps the crocodiles away. You laugh, but he doesn't seem entirely joking. Historians still argue whether these little invocations were born from religion, superstition, or sheer habit. But the lines blur easily here, as they so often do in Egypt. To wash is to restore order. To restore order is to please the gods. And pleasing the gods? Always a good idea. In the distance, a temple bell sounds, a low, resonant hum that rolls across the water. A few washerfolk pause and bow their heads. Even the priests wash before sunset, someone mutters. You realize the timing isn't coincidence. Every evening, the temple attendants bathe and change robes before performing twilight offerings. Clean bodies for clean rituals. And they too use spells. Some are written on scraps of papyrus, little recipes of purification. One fragment unearthed at Deir el-Medina describes a mix of natron, lotus, and words of the sun. Another prescribes washing hands in the Nile, facing east, until the heart feels light. Even the commoners echo that idea. Before meals, before prayers, before sleep, water, always water. The Nile isn't just a river, it's Egypt's bloodstream, its great purifier. The older woman has finished her washing. She sits beside you, her hands still wet. You notice tiny charms tied around her wrists, small blue beads shaped like eyes, little shells, and a clay amulet shaped like a scarab. Protection, you ask? Always, she replies, for stains and spirits alike. You smile, unsure if she's teasing. She explains that certain stains, especially blood or oil, were considered more than dirty. They were unlucky, signs that a person had brushed too close to sickness or misfortune. Removing them wasn't just cleaning, it was lifting a curse. She tells you how her grandmother once washed the linens of a man struck by fever. We sang all night, she said, not to chase away death, but to remind him where to go. You ask if the songs worked. She gives a long, quiet look toward the darkening water. She slept, she finally says. And so did we. There's a pause, long enough for the river to fill it. You remember the temple murals you saw earlier, the ones showing gods washing kings in sacred waters? They're symbolic, of course, but maybe they're also practical, an echo of the same belief that cleansing restores balance between life and decay.
Some scholars think laundry rituals were tied to the mythology of Osiris, god of death and rebirth. The washing, drying, and folding could have mirrored his own resurrection, the body washed, wrapped, renewed. Maybe, you think, every clean robe was a tiny resurrection, a daily proof that order still triumphs over chaos.
You wake to the sound of rippling water again. But this time, it's not the Nile. It's the hum of a washing machine in some faraway apartment, centuries removed from sand and lotus petals. The world has changed, but the rhythm? Somehow, it hasn't. You blink and realize the transition is only in your imagination. You're still sitting by the riverbank, where the early morning haze turns the water silver. The washerfolk are already at work again, repeating motions so timeless they might as well be breathing. You watch, and in the soft swirl of foam and sun, you begin tracing the thread, how everything you see here flows forward into everything you know. Because the truth is this: every spin cycle, every whirring machine, every delicate wash button has its roots right here, in the Nile's steady pulse. Historians still argue whether the Egyptians invented soap or simply perfected the idea of washing without it. Their use of natron, a mix of salt and soda ash, was both brilliant and accidental. They discovered that this powder, when mixed with water, lifted dirt and grease from linen better than anything else. Over time, this knowledge spread northward, carried by traders along the Mediterranean. You can imagine the moment a Greek merchant stops at a riverside market, sees a woman beating linen with clay paste, and wonders, what is that white dust that makes the cloth shine? He brings a handful home, and soon the idea begins its long, slow journey through time. The Greeks took the lesson and adapted it. They added animal fats, forming the first primitive soaps. The Romans, being Romans, industrialized it. By the 1st century CE, entire soap-making workshops lined the streets of Pompeii, where workers boiled ashes, oils, and lime in great vats. But strangely enough, the Romans also kept one Egyptian trick alive: the art of stomping. Yes, those communal foot-washing vats you saw by the Nile became the inspiration for Roman philoniki, laundries where workers trampled tunics and togas in tubs of soapy water. Some even used urine, rich in ammonia, as a cleaning agent. It worked brilliantly, even if it didn't smell as divine as lotus petals. You grin to yourself, imagining a Roman wifehouse explaining that her secret to spotless linen is, well, human urine. Practicality, you realize, is timeless. And so the current keeps flowing. Through the Middle Ages, where monks washed their robes in cloistered courtyards whispering psalms instead of Nile charms. Through the Renaissance, when soap became a luxury, perfumed with lavender or rose instead of natron and clay. Then centuries later, in the early industrial age, someone, perhaps a chemist, perhaps a weary homemaker, thought, there has to be an easier way. And thus came the washboard, the wringer, and finally the machine. But if you listen closely, even the washing machine still hums like the Nile. The drum spins like the beating of linen against stone. The rinse and drain echo the ancient channels carved by Egyptian hands. The cycle ends with a sigh of steam, the modern version of the desert's drying breeze. It's a strange comfort knowing that something as mundane as laundry carries 3,000 years of unbroken continuity. You could take a washerwoman from ancient Thebes, place her in a modern laundromat, and though she'd be baffled by the buttons, she'd understand the intent immediately. Cleanliness, renewal, the small, steady ritual of bringing order out of chaos. You think again of the palace, the temple, the riverbank. 3 kinds of washing: divine, daily, and magical. In modern life, maybe they've merged. You clean your clothes before work? Practical. You light a candle while doing it? Ritual. You smile when it's done and breathe in the scent of fresh fabric? Spiritual. Maybe that's how ancient Egypt lives on, in the quiet sanctity of ordinary acts. There's even a theory, half joking, half serious, that modern detergent ads are just the descendants of ancient purification hymns. Both promise purity, both sell renewal. Only the packaging changed. And the perfumes? Still there. Scientists recently recreated the scent of an ancient Egyptian perfume found in a sealed jar near Memphis. Sweet, resinous, with hints of honey and cinnamon. They called it the scent of Cleopatra, though it probably belonged to a merchant's wife. Still, it proves something. The longing to smell clean, to feel new, is eternal. You take a deep breath, the air thick with heat and jasmine. For a moment, the two worlds, ancient and modern, blur together. The Nile becomes a silver washing drum, and the washerman's songs merge with the faint hum of a machine. The rhythm continues, unbroken. You look down at your hands, still damp from the river. They smell faintly of natron and oil, primitive soap, timeless scent. And it occurs to you that in washing your clothes, you're also washing your day, your fatigue, your restless mind. The Nile taught humanity more than irrigation or trade. It taught the art of renewal through repetition, the act of doing something small again and again until calm returns. Maybe that's why laundry remains one of the world's quietest meditations. Whether it's linen flapping in desert air or cotton tumbling in a metal drum, the result is the same. Motion, sound, cleansing, silence. You stand, stretch, and glance once more at the river. The sun has dipped lower now, turning the water to bronze. Washerfolk pack their tools, their laughter mingling with the calls of birds heading home. You imagine them returning tomorrow, doing it all again, not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. Because the Nile, like life, never truly stops flowing. And in that eternal rhythm, you hear something soothing, something human, something ancient and modern at once. You smile. The world's first laundry day never really ended. It just changed machines.
The sun is sinking, slow and deliberate into the wide horizon of sand. The Nile, golden just a moment ago, now carries a softer sheen. Amber, then rose, then a deep violet that looks almost liquid velvet. Around you, the last washerfolk are finishing their work. The rhythmic slapping of linen fades one by one until the river's song is just water and wind. You're still sitting where you've been all day, feet half buried in cooling sand, the smell of natron and lotus still clinging faintly to your skin. A faint breeze moves through the reeds, and for a moment you could swear the entire river sighs. A few women are still folding the final linens, stacking them into neat bundles tied with reed string. The fabric catches the last light like glass, clean, weightless, glowing softly. Nearby, one man whistles while wringing the last tunic dry, his motions slow now, almost lazy. The day is done, and with it, the endless work of washing away the dust of another sun. The older woman you met earlier passes by, her arms full of folded robes. She pauses just long enough to nod toward you. "The river thanks you," she says quietly. She likes new hands. You smile. You don't quite believe her, but you want to. Around you, the desert begins its nightly transformation. The heat slips away first, replaced by the kind of cool that feels alive. Then come the sounds. Crickets, frogs, the soft creak of palm leaves. Somewhere far off, a donkey brays. Somewhere closer, laughter fades behind mud brick walls. The washerfolk drift home along narrow footpaths. They carry their bundles on their heads, balanced perfectly without effort. Their shadows stretch long and thin across the sand, merging with the last ribbons of light. For a brief moment, they look like hieroglyphs come to life, moving quietly, rhythmically against the amber sky. You stay seated, watching the last reflections play over the water. The Nile itself seems to slow, the current less insistent now, as if the great river is taking its evening breath. You notice how the clean linens, laid out across the reeds to dry, catch the soft dusk.
They ripple like sleeping birds, whispering in the wind. It's easy to imagine that each one holds a fragment of sunlight within its weave, a trace of the day preserved for tomorrow. Somewhere in the distance, a temple gong sounds, 3 deep tones that echo over the desert. Evening prayers have begun. You can picture the priests in their freshly laundered robes, their feet bare on the cool stone, their chants drifting upward with the incense smoke. It's the same rhythm again. Wash, renew, rest, begin. A young boy runs by laughing, chasing a goat that's stolen a scrap of cloth. His mother scolds him gently, calling him back. And for a moment, the simplicity of it all, the laughter, the scolding, the fading light, feels like the truest kind of peace. You reach down and trail your fingers through the water. It's cooler now, smoother, almost silky. The surface trembles with faint reflections of stars just beginning to show. Somewhere deep within that flow, the day's dust and sweat and effort are being carried away, diluted, forgotten, returned to the earth. You wonder how many thousands of such evenings the Nile has seen, how many times it has held the stories of washerfolk, kings, and wanderers, how many times it has whispered, "Rest now, it's clean again." A gentle voice behind you, perhaps the same washerman from before, says, "The river always finishes her work." You turn to look, but he's already walking away, carrying a basket of damp linen towards the fading sun. You stay a little longer. The horizon is now a line of copper melting into blue. The smell of the river deepens. Fresh water, damp reeds, and the faint trace of natron. The breeze grows cooler, threading through your hair, tugging softly at your sleeves. The clean linen sway in the dim light, whispering like old secrets. For a moment, you feel an overwhelming sense of stillness. Not emptiness, but the full, calm kind, the kind that settles over you after everything necessary has been done. And that's when you realize this isn't just a story about washing clothes. It's about the rhythm of renewal, about all the small ways people, ancient and modern alike, keep chaos at bay by scrubbing, rinsing, folding, beginning again. The washerfolk knew it, the pharaoh knew it, you knew it too. You lie back in the sand. The stars above you are crisp and countless, reflected in the river like scattered diamonds. A frog croaks nearby. The night air feels clean, light, forgiving. Your eyes grow heavy as the final beam of sunlight glides over the Nile, catching one last shimmer on the folded linen before fading completely. The air hums with peace, the soft pulse of water and wind lulling you closer to sleep. If you listen carefully, you can almost hear the whisper of the river itself. Everything washed, everything clean, everything begins again. The sound fades with your thoughts, blending into the rhythm of your breath. And as you drift off beneath the deep Egyptian sky, linen drying softly beside the ancient water, the world feels perfectly still, perfectly washed. Now the night settles fully over the Nile, wrapping you in a blanket of cool silence. The last glimmers of light vanish beyond the horizon, and even the insects seem to slow their song. The air feels softer now, almost weightless, as though the desert itself is exhaling after the long, sunlit day. You breathe with it, slowly, in and out. The scent of river water lingers faintly, familiar and safe. Somewhere, a linen sheet flutters once more in the breeze. The sound is light as a sigh. Your mind drifts lazily back through the day. The chatter of the washer folk, the rhythm of beating cloth, the warmth of the sand beneath your hands. Every sound, every movement now feels distant, softened, fading into something dreamlike. Imagine that the river still flows beside you, steady, and endless. Each gentle wave carries away the leftover noise of thought, the fragments of memory, the tiny things that clung to you. The Nile has always known how to cleanse, not just fabric, but fatigue. Not just dust, but restlessness. Let your body feel that same quiet rhythm now. The soft current of breath, the slow turning of the earth, the hush of linen drying in the night air. You are clean, renewed, part of the same cycle that has soothed generations before you. Somewhere in the far distance, a temple bell rings once more, so faint it might only exist in memory. It echoes across the river and fades into the stars. And as your eyes close, the words return, gentle as water over stone. Everything washed, everything clean, everything begins again. Sleep well, traveler of the Nile. Sweet dreams. End of script. Sweet dreams.